All right. Hi, Tina. I'm excited to dive into our last law today. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, and I'm really excited to look at this.
All right. Well, we won't waste any time. Let's dive right in. Before we start looking at kid work, let's really think about why we are looking at this particular assignment. So we're looking at question 12 of the IA. Why is this a good assignment to spend some more time on and LASW?
Um, so it's an assignment that students completed by themselves, so it's a true representation of their own work without my help or their classmates' help. And it's also a priority standard and skill that students need to get good at on their own. And it's all about central idea, which is standard two. So it's a meaty question to look at, and it's going to give us insight into how they're understanding text kind of more broadly.
Yeah, I agree. It's a cold task. They did it on their own, and it's a power skill. Great. Before we jump into student work, let's first unpack the question and standard. We're going to get really, really clear on what we're looking for here in terms of student thinking and then ultimately what they're producing. So let's start by looking at the standard and question. You can see it here on our shared document. So the question being, what is the central idea of the article? What is lake effect snow? And use two details from your response to support your response. So looking at this question, what do students need to know, show, and understand to be successful?
Yep. Well, it's a standard two question, but it's focused on a central idea, not a summary. So students need to know that a central idea summarizes the author's main message and purpose, and that needs to be specific to the text. So they need to examine the author's claims and figure out the development of the ideas over the course of the text. And then finally, they need to understand that they might need to look at the structure of the text to help them get a really precise central idea as sometimes insights unfold over the course of the text.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So to stamp, they need to know that a central idea is about an author's main message and purpose, and that might develop over the text. We're not just looking for a recall of this is what happened. We're looking for that bigger picture of the author's main message and purpose. We're looking for them to provide a clear statement with evidence to support it. And that ultimately is the do, right? Um, and so they're able to put all that together and will give us a clear understanding of do they know what a central idea is? Can they show us with their writing? And then what do they need to understand about it overall? Okay, so we know what the skill requires. Let's now have a look at what this answer would look like with this specific text, keeping in mind what they need to know, show, and understand, but also what that sounds like with this text. We both came prepared to the meeting with our own exemplars. We're going to have a read of one another's. While we're looking at the other person's, what I want us to think about here is what's the same and what's different, and does it do the no show and understand? So let's have a look, and then we'll come back and chat. Okay. So what do you notice is the same or different?
So I noticed they both have a central idea about what the article's about, not just the topic. It's about what the author is really teaching and why it matters. While mine has a specific example of Buffalo, it's still applicable across other cities like Buffalo. And both have two pieces of evidence that develop our claim, so we meet that point. And we both analyze the evidence instead of just saying things like this connects because or other like filler statements like that.
Yeah, I agree. And then a difference I noticed is that while mine talks about how this happens and the cause and effect and the sort of scientific impact or knowledge that adds, yours brings in this additional like human and geographical experience. So they both get at this bigger idea of this weather system has this impact on people. It just goes about it in a slightly different way.
Saw that too.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Because we know that not every child is going to say exactly the same thing, but they need to be within these bigger ideas.
Right.
Great. We've also been talking a lot over the past couple weeks about making sure that our students are doing conceptual thinking and have conceptual work that they're putting out there. So let's think, are these two responses examples of conceptual student output? And if so, yes. Or if so, why? And if not, why not?
So I think that they're both conceptual because neither just lists the process.
Mhm.
They both focus on patterns and meaning in the text, and they both ask that bigger question of what does this phenomenon mean, and what is the author trying to tell me about the text?
Yeah, totally agree. I think these are two strong examples of what conceptual work could look like here. Great. So we've aligned on content. Let's now lock it down to a few CFS. And when we're thinking about this, we're thinking like, what is a strong criteria for success for this response? Looking at our shared document, we've been working a lot with some shared understanding of what conceptual thinking CFS is here, and that's transferable. But let's narrow it down to what it looks like in this particular response. So let's get clear on that. What is the CFS for this answer?
So I think that a strong response is going to identify lake effect snow as a cause and effect weather system involving cold air and warm lake water. And then it will identify at least two relevant details from the text.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get even more narrow. Like, what details are you looking for? What evidence is the best evidence here?
Okay. I think things like cold air moving over warm water causes evaporation and cooling. The October surprise dropped up to 27 inches of snow. Can you even imagine? Lake effect snow can affect areas up to 100 miles away. Buffalo's among the snowiest cities because of lake effect snow, and lake effect snow usually ends when lakes freeze over.
I had those pieces of evidence too. I think they're the strongest.
Yeah.
What else do we need to have in our CFS here?
So they really need to not just identify those details, but they also need to be able to use those details to show why storms can be extreme or how lake effect snow shapes life in lake regions or why it happens so quickly and intensely.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, I've jotted all those down here so we can reference them as we're looking over kid work. Before we start looking at that kid work, though, let's think about what do we want this not to look or sound like? Like what will help us figure out if kids are off the mark here? What would we see?
So it shouldn't just be about the steps to weather storms or just facts about them. It needs to be the bigger idea, the why the author wants us to know
Yeah,
about this.
absolutely. That's the central idea piece, right? That's what's
Yeah.
different to it
Yep.
being a recall or a summary. Fabulous. Okay,
Yep.
now that we've got that down, let's dive into looking at some kid work. We've got our CFS, we've got our exemplar, and we know what it shouldn't sound like. As we go through the work, we're going to bucket into three different categories: the got it, really strong responses, the almost there, and then the not there yet. Sound good? Great. Okay. I'll take this half. You can take this half. We'll have a look over for trends and we'll come back and chat.
Okay, I think I found a trend.
Great. What are you noticing?
I'm noticing here that a lot of students are including evidence, but they're not turning it into a central idea. They're gathering evidence and key details, but not synthesizing that into a central idea. It's just a topic. So, for example, Celia describes the formation and location, but not why the effect matters, missing the author's purpose. Similarly, Tayana stated the topic, what it is and where, but with no analysis. And Trinity picked up on this article being about Buffalo getting snow every day, but doesn't connect it to the bigger effect. They're missing the why it matters part or the author's purpose.
I saw the same thing. And a couple examples that came up for me. Aylin focused on one storm, but didn't make it about the phenomenon. And Yusuf listed the facts, but he didn't then say, like, this is then what that is. So he didn't get to that bigger idea.
Right. So then that's definitely the gap.
Agreed. Now, did you see any students who had really strong answers that we can shout out?
Yes, David and Messiah had really strong, like big ideas that were grounded in the text. They did a great job of explaining their evidence.
Yeah, I'd add Grace. I saw the same thing in her response, which, we've really been working with her particular like conceptual thinking, and we're seeing it here, which is exciting.
Great. That is really exciting.
Awesome. Okay, so now we have the trend and we have a few students to celebrate and we know the trend and the gap. So what are our next steps?
Well, I want to go over these answers and help students see the right answers and how to update it next time.
Great. So keeping that transferable and figuring out like how we can help them see that a central idea should look like this in the future. Fabulous. Do you want to do a show call or a model?
Well, when I'm thinking through the amount of students who haven't gotten this yet, it's definitely most of the kids. So I think that I need to do a model.
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely more than 70%. We saw 3 kids who had it in a class of over 30. Definitely.
Yep.
So, what do you want your model to highlight?
I'm not sure. I think I just want to like walk through a response and show them like what a really good response looks like.
Let's narrow that a little bit. We want our model and this reteach to really be going after what students are not yet doing, going after the gap. So, keeping that in mind, what should you model?
So I think most of them aren't synthesizing a central idea. They're just kind of like retelling or recalling a list of facts.
Agreed. So that's what your model should focus on, synthesizing these details to answer the question, why does this matter, or what is the author's purpose?
Great. That
All
makes a
right.
lot.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's script that now. When would we want to do this before we like let's pick a
Mhm.
time in the next couple days where we would be able to go over this.
So I think it would make sense. There is an upcoming wit and wisdom lesson. I think it would make sense to do it in the launch there. And there's also an organized lesson next week with a new text where we could do something similar as well.
Yeah, great. All right, let's lock in those next steps before we start scripting. So we're going to model and synthesize into one, or model synthesizing these details into one big idea and not just retelling. And then we'll be able to embed that in either a launch or welcome next week or that organized lesson you were talking about, which I think
Yep.
is a great example of when we could reassess or really show again.
Great.
All right, let's get scripting.